Part 1. The Summons. The Galactic Council Chamber hung in the silent dark above Varelli's Prime, a ring of polished obsidian and glowing alloy that spun slowly around the gas giant's amber clouds. Inside, 17 species sat in tiered arcs, their forms as varied as the stars they came from, some armored in chitin, others draped in light-woven cloaks, a few existing only as shimmering projections. They had ruled the known galaxy for over 3,000 cycles, not through force alone but through careful balance, ancient treaties, and the unspoken rule that no single race should rise too fast or too far. Yet now, for the first time in centuries, that balance trembled. At the center of the lower dais, a single empty seat waited. It was small, unadorned, made of plain steel rather than the crystalline thrones of the founding members. It belonged to humanity, a species granted observer status only 70 years ago after their first clumsy warp jump startled a Keelian patrol near Proxima. Since then, humans had expanded quickly. Too quickly, some whispered. They built stations on dead moons, mined asteroids with reckless speed, and spoke little but acted often. Still, they had always shown up when summoned, always bowed to protocol, always apologized when they overstepped. Until now. Ambassador Kyle Denton entered through the rear gate alone, wearing a dark gray suit with no insignia. His boots clicked against the floor, the only sharp sound in a room thick with hushed telepathic murmurs and low-frequency hums. He did not bow. He did not salute. He simply walked to his seat, sat down, and folded his hands. His face was calm, but his eyes held the quiet weariness of someone who had stopped pretending. Counselor Zira Voss of the Keelian hegemony rose first. Her segmented body rose like a coiled serpent, her voice sharp as fractured glass. Ambassador Denton, you are 93 standard minutes late. Your absence during the preliminary session was noted as deliberate defiance. Kyle did not look up. I was reviewing your latest communique, the one that declared human outposts in Sector 9 illegal without prior council approval. Those outposts violate the Neutral Rim Accords. Zira snapped. You placed weapons platforms near Myrathi's sacred voids. You activated quantum beacons inside restricted zones. And you refuse to share data from your new drive trials. Data that clearly exceeds treaty limits. A murmur rippled through the chamber. The Virellans shifted their translucent limbs uneasily. The Myrathi projection flickered, its face unreadable but its presence suddenly heavier. Kyle finally met her gaze. We activated those beacons because your patrols cut our supply lines to Titan Colony last month. We built those platforms because Kalian raiders, unofficial of course, attacked our mining freighter near Helios Drift. And as for the drive data, he paused, just long enough to let the silence press against them. You never shared your phase shift shielding schematics when we asked, yet you expect us to hand over everything we build. You are guests here, said Elder Torvin of the Virelon Conclave, his voice like wind through stone. Guests do not arm themselves in the host's home. We stopped being guests the moment you started treating us like children who might break your furniture, Kyle replied evenly. We've complied, compromised, and conceded for decades. And what have we gained? Trade quotas that shrink every cycle. Voting rights that don't count. And now ultimatums disguised as invitations. He stood slowly, brushing invisible dust from his sleeve. Earth has reviewed your demands. We will not dismantle our outposts. We will not surrender our propulsion research. And we will not attend another session where the outcome is decided before we walk in. The chamber froze. No species had ever spoken so plainly, so bluntly in the Council's history. Protocol demanded layers of phrasing, honorifics, and diplomatic cushioning. Kyle offered none. You would risk war over pride? Zira hissed. We would risk nothing, Kyle said. Because you won't attack. You need our labor, our engineers, our pilots in the outer sectors. And deep down, you know we're no longer the wide-eyed newcomers who jumped into warp by accident. We've learned. We've adapted. And we've watched how you treat those who can't fight back. He turned toward the exit. Tell your masters that humanity will not negotiate under threat. If you want to talk as equals, send a real offer, not a list of commands wrapped in pretty words. Before anyone could respond, he walked out. The doors sealed behind him with a soft sigh. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the Myrathi projection dimmed and vanished without a word. The Virellans began exchanging low pulses of light. Zira slammed a clawed fist onto her console, cracking the surface. On the observation deck above, hidden behind one-way crystal, Commander Elena Cruz watched Kyle's shuttle detach from the docking arm and vanish into the starfield. She had insisted on coming against orders just to see this moment. Beside her, Lieutenant Devin McKay gripped the railing, his knuckles white. "He just lit a fuse," Devin whispered. "No," Elena said quietly. "He just showed them the bomb was already built." Back on Mars Orbit Station, engineer Jordan Ellis received a coded ping on his private channel. 3 words, "It's begun." He didn't smile. He didn't cheer. He simply closed the message and returned to his console, where lines of code scrolled endlessly, lines that would soon make human ships disappear from every alien sensor in the galaxy. Meanwhile, across the council chamber, panic began to spread. Not loud, not chaotic, but cold and creeping. Because for the first time they realized humanity wasn't asking for a seat at the table. They were building their own. And they might not need the old one at all. Chart 2, Whispers of Defiance. The silence after Kyle Denton's exit did not last long. Within hours, the Galactic Council's secure channels buzzed with urgent exchanges, encrypted debates, and veiled threats. But on Mars Orbit Station, silence was a practiced art. Commander Elena Cruz stood in the dim glow of the tactical bay, arms crossed, watching as rows of status lights blinked green across the main display. Every human vessel within 3 sectors had gone to condition yellow, not full alert but ready. Ready meant engines warmed, shields cycled, weapons offline but primed. It meant crews sleeping in shifts near their stations, not in quarters. It meant no more casual comms, no personal messages, no music on open channels. Lieutenant Devin McKay approached with a data slate in hand, his steps quiet on the metal grating. "Fleet status is stable," he said. All captains acknowledged the new protocols. Titan Colony reports the last shipment of Ares components arrived without incident. Elena nodded. She did not look at him. Her eyes stayed fixed on the star map hovering above the central console. Tiny red markers showed known alien patrol routes. Blue dots, human ships, were absent. Not because they weren't there, but because they chose not to be seen. "Did they try to scan the convoy?" Keelian frigate passed within 2,000 clicks, and Devin said. "Didn't even slow down. They think it was an empty cargo hauler." "Good." Elena finally turned. Her face was calm, but her voice carried the weight of years spent watching humanity bow while others took. She remembered the early days. Human diplomats apologizing for speaking too loud. Engineers told their designs were too aggressive. Miners fined for extracting resources from culturally sensitive asteroids that no one had claimed for centuries. The Council called it order. Humans called it control. "They still don't believe we can do it," Devin said almost to himself. "Let them believe," Elena replied. "Belief is slower than action." Meanwhile, on Titan Colony, buried beneath layers of ice and reinforced alloy, Jordan Ellis wiped sweat from his brow and stared at the humming core of the Ares Veil generator. It stood 10 meters tall, wrapped in copper coils and pulsing with soft blue light. The device didn't hide ships by bending light or masking heat. It tricked sensors by rewriting the very data they collected, feeding false emptiness where a destroyer sat idle, or mimicking a drifting asteroid where a carrier drifted silently. It was not cloaking. It was erasure. His assistant, a young technician named Maya Cole, handed him a thermal readout. "Field stability at 98%. We can run it for 72 hours straight before the capacitors need cooldown." "Good," Jordan said. "Run it for 73. He tapped a command into his wrist pad. Across the hangar, 3 freighters powered up their auxiliary systems. Inside each, a smaller Ares unit hummed to life. These weren't warships. They were supply vessels, medical transports, colony tenders. But now they could move unseen. That was the point. Humanity didn't need to win a war. It needed to make war impossible to start. Back on Mars, Elena reviewed old footage on a private screen. It showed a human research vessel, the Dawn Chaser, drifting dead in the Orion Veil 6 months ago. Its hull was scarred, its comms dark. Official reports called it a reactor failure. But recovered logs told a different story. Keelian stealth drones had latched onto its hull, fried its navigation, and left it to die. No distress signal was answered. No rescue came. The Council called it an unfortunate accident. Earth called it a warning. Devin entered again, this time with news. Council just issued a public statement. They're calling Kyle's remarks unprecedented and destabilizing. They're urging all members to restrict human access to shared jump lanes. Elena didn't react. Let them close the lanes. We've mapped 7 new corridors through the nebula belt. They don't know about them because they never bothered to look. She walked to the viewport. Outside, the red curve of Mars hung against the black, dotted with the quiet lights of orbital docks. Thousands of humans lived and worked here. Engineers, pilots, medics, teachers. None of them asked for this moment, but all of them would face it together. On Earth, in a secure bunker beneath the rocky hills of Colorado, a small group gathered around a circular table. They wore no uniforms, carried no titles, but their names were known in whispers. Dr. Lena Cho, lead physicist on the Neural Combat Interface. General Ray Morgan, retired but still sharp-eyed, and Kyle Denton, who had just returned from Varelli's Prime. They were the Shadow Council, formed not by law but by necessity. Their only rule: no decision that risked humanity would be made without full understanding of the cost. The Council thinks we're bluffing, Kyle said, leaning forward. They think we'll fold when the trade stops, when the sanctions bite. They don't know we've been stockpiling for 5 years, Dr. Cho replied. Food synthesizers, fusion cells, medical nanites. We're self-sufficient for 18 months minimum. And if it goes longer? General Morgan asked. Then we show them what the Orion Veil really hides, Kyle said quietly. No one argued. They had all seen the simulations. They knew what waited in the dark. Meanwhile, across human space, a different kind of message spread, not through official channels but through worker networks, colony forums, and encrypted family calls. The message was simple: we said no. And for the first time, that no carried weight. On Ganymede, dock workers refused to load alien freighters. On Ceres, students painted murals of Kyle walking out of the council chamber. On the moon, old veterans stood a little taller. The council saw defiance as chaos, but to humans it felt like dignity. Jordan Ellis stepped outside Titan's main airlock for a rare moment of quiet. The sky was black, the stars sharp and cold. He thought of his father, who had worked on the first human warp drive only to be denied credit because human tech wasn't mature enough for galactic standards. He thought of his sister, who died when her transport was rerouted through a safe corridor that turned out to be a Keelian ambush zone. He thought of all the times humanity had been told to wait, to learn, to be patient. Now patience was over. Back on Mars Orbit Station, Elena gave the final order. Activate Veil Protocol Alpha on all frontier outposts. Cut external comms except for emergency burst signals. And Devon, yes, Commander? Tell every ship to stand by. Not for war. For choice. Because that was the heart of it. Not conquest. Not revenge. Just the right to choose their own path without permission. And somewhere in the void between stars, human ships began to vanish. Not from fear, but from strength. The galaxy would soon learn that silence could be louder than any weapon. These part the fracture. Panic does not always roar. Sometimes it spreads like frost across glass. Quiet, invisible at first, then suddenly everywhere. In the Galactic Council, that frost began the moment human ships stopped appearing on long-range scans. At first, the Keelians claimed it was a trick, a temporary glitch in their sensor nets. Then the Virellans reported the same. Then the Marathi, whose detection fields spanned entire star systems, admitted they could no longer track even the smallest human courier near the neutral rim. That was when the real fear took hold. Counselor Zira Voss demanded immediate military readiness. She stood before the emergency session, her voice trembling not with anger but with something rarer: uncertainty. They are hiding, she declared, and hidden things strike when you least expect. Elder Torvin of the Virellans urged caution, reminding the chamber that provoking a species capable of vanishing entire fleets could lead to chaos. But his words carried less weight now. Trust, once assumed, had cracked. Meanwhile, on Mars Orbit Station, Commander Elena Cruz watched the alien response unfold through intercepted comms and passive listening posts. She did not gloat. She did not smile. She simply noted how quickly the Council's tone had shifted, from condescension to confusion, from control to concern. Beside her, Lieutenant Devon McKay monitored fleet positions on a private display. Blue icons drifted through known space, unseen, unhurried. They were not hiding in fear. They were waiting in strength. They're scanning the Orion Veil again, Devon said. Third time this cycle. Let them scan, Elena replied. They'll find empty space. Just like last time. The Orion Veil was a tangle of magnetic storms and ion clouds long considered impassable. The Council had mapped it centuries ago and marked it as a natural barrier. But human engineers, led by Jordan Ellis and his team on Titan, had discovered something the others missed. Stable corridors hidden within the chaos. Paths that only revealed themselves with precise timing and adaptive shielding. Now those corridors held over 200 human vessels, silent and ready. On Earth, in the Colorado bunker, Kyle Denton reviewed the latest intelligence. The Council was fracturing. The Keelians pushed for a blockade. The Virellans wanted talks. The Marathi had gone completely silent, withdrawing their envoys without explanation. It was exactly what the Shadow Council had predicted. The old powers relied on unity to maintain control. Remove that and their authority crumbled. They're scared we'll attack, Dr. Lena Cho said, sipping black coffee from a chipped mug. But they're more scared we won't. Because if we don't attack, General Ray Morgan added, then our silence isn't weakness. It's choice. And choice means power. Kyle nodded. That was the core of it. Humanity wasn't trying to win a war. It was proving it didn't need to fight one to be respected. Back on Titan, Jordan Ellis stood before the main Ares Veil generator, now running at full capacity. The hum filled the chamber like a heartbeat. Maya Cole approached with a new report. Field integrity holding. We've extended coverage to the outer mining platforms. They're completely dark to external scans. Good, Jordan said. Now run a test pulse on frequency Delta 9. I want to see if it fools my Rathi resonance trackers. Maya hesitated. That's risky. If they detect even a flicker, they won't, Jordan said firmly. Because we're not hiding from them. We're teaching them what it feels like to be blind. The pulse fired. For 3 seconds, every human installation in Sector 9 vanished from every known detection method. Gravimetric, thermal, quantum echo, even temporal drift sensors. Then silence returned. No alarms, no alerts. Just empty space where a civilization thrived. On the bridge of the carrier Perseus Dawn, stationed deep inside the Orion Veil, Devin McKay watched as a Keelian scout cruiser drifted past less than 500 kilometers away. Its sensors swept the area, lights blinking in rhythmic patterns. It saw nothing. Not the carrier, not the destroyers flanking it, not the supply tenders drifting like ghosts. Devin exhaled slowly. It wasn't just technology. It was psychology. The moment the Council realized they could no longer see humanity, they would begin to imagine threats everywhere, and imagination was far more dangerous than truth. In the Council chamber, arguments grew louder. Species that had stood together for generations now eyed each other with suspicion. Had the Virellans secretly aided humans? Had the Marathi known about this capability all along? Accusations flew. Alliances strained. The very structure of galactic order, built on predictability, began to warp under the weight of the unknown. Zyra Voss finally called for a vote. Authorize preemptive surveillance sweeps of all human-controlled space. But the motion failed. 6 species abstained. 3 voted no. For the first time in its history, the Council could not agree on a single course of action. That failure echoed louder than any weapon. On Mars, Elena received a private message from Kyle. 2 words. Hold steady. She didn't need more. She knew what came next. The Council would either break apart or come begging. Either way, humanity had already won the first real victory. Not with fire, but with absence. Jordan Ellis looked up from his console as an alert chimed softly. Not an alarm. A signal from Earth. It was time. He input the final command sequence. Across human space, every Ares Veil unit synchronized to a single frequency, not to hide deeper, but to prepare to be seen again on their own terms. Because the fracture was complete. The old galaxy was cracking, and through those cracks something new would rise. Part 4. The Silence Speaks. The Council's peace envoy arrived at Lunar Command 3 days after the last human signal vanished from all official channels. Their ship, a slender Virellan diplomatic cruiser named Whisper of Accord, glided into the docking bay with ceremonial lights glowing and protocol drones deployed. They expected to be met by guards, by aides, by the usual human formality. Instead, the bay was empty. No personnel, no welcome, no sound except the hum of life support and the distant creak of metal cooling in vacuum. Envoy Trell of the Virellans stepped onto the platform, his translucent robes shimmering under the pale lights. He carried a sealed data crystal containing a new proposal, less harsh than before, offering limited autonomy in exchange for transparency. He believed it was generous. He believed humanity would accept, But as he walked through the silent corridors of Lunar Command, past darkened control rooms and empty mess halls, doubt crept in like cold air through a cracked seal. In the central chamber, where human diplomats once held briefings, only one thing remained active: a single screen on the far wall. It flickered to life as Triel entered, showing not a person, not a message, but a looped transmission playing on every frequency, every channel, every public and private comnet across known space. The voice was calm, familiar, Ambassador Kyle Denton's, but the words struck like stone. We asked for equality. You offered terms. We choose neither. The screen went dark, then replayed, again and again. Trell stood there for a long time. He tried hailing Earth, Mars, Titan. No response. He scanned the facility. No heat signatures. No power surges. Just silence. When he returned to his ship, his report was brief. They are gone. Or they wish us to believe they are. But they were not gone. Aboard the Perseus Dawn, deep in the Orion Veil, Lieutenant Devin McKay watched the envoy's ship depart on long-range sensors. He did not feel triumph. He felt the weight of what they were doing, holding an entire galaxy in suspense, not through threats but through absence. Beside him, Commander Elena Cruz studied the same feat, her expression unreadable. They'll panic now, Devin said. They already have, Elena replied. Panic isn't noise. It's the silence between heartbeats. Across 6 sectors, human colonies had gone dark to external comms, not because they were abandoned, but because they chose invisibility. On Ceres, farmers still tended hydroponic fields. On Europa, children still attended school in shielded domes. On the Outer Rim, miners still drilled into asteroids. But to the galaxy, it was as if humanity had folded itself into the void and vanished. The psychological effect was immediate. Alien traders refused to approach human space. Patrol ships doubled their routes, scanning empty corridors for phantom fleets. Rumors spread. Some claimed humans had fled beyond known space. Others whispered they were preparing a first strike. The Keelians placed their homeworlds on high alert. The Marathi, for the first time in centuries, activated their ancient defense beacons. Yet no attack came, no declaration, no movement, just silence. On Titan, Jordan Ellis monitored the Ares Veil network from his underground lab. Every human vessel, every station, every outpost now operated under full stealth protocols. The system didn't just hide them, it made their presence logically impossible. Sensors saw empty space because the Veil fed them data that confirmed it. Even if a Kalian ship passed within meters of a human destroyer, its computers would insist nothing was there. It wasn't illusion, it was truth rewritten. Maya Cole handed him a new readout. The Veil held during the envoy's scan. They didn't detect a single power signature. Good, Jordan said. Now begin Phase 2. Activate passive mimicry on all outer platforms. Phase 2 meant more than hiding. It meant deception. Human outposts would now emit false signals, simulating decay, abandonment, even asteroid collisions. The galaxy would see ruins where life thrived. Confusion would breed hesitation, and hesitation gave humanity time. Back on Mars Orbit Station, Elena reviewed the final fleet positions. 212 ships, all cloaked, all ready. Not to fight, but to appear. At the right moment. She knew the Council's weakness. They relied on information. Control the information and you controlled them. Devin broke the quiet. Do you think they'll understand what we're showing them? They'll understand fear first, Elena said. Then respect. If we're lucky, wisdom will follow. Meanwhile, on Earth, Kyle Denton stood in the Colorado bunker, watching live feeds from across human space. The Shadow Council had fallen silent. No debates. No second guessing. They had set the course. Now they waited. General Ray Morgan spoke softly. This is the hardest part. Doing nothing while the galaxy burns with questions. We're not doing nothing, Kyle replied. We're teaching them to listen. And listen they did. Across Council worlds, leaders gathered in emergency sessions with no agenda. No solutions. Only fear. Species that once mocked human impulsiveness now whispered about their cunning. The Varellans proposed sending another envoy. The Keelians argued for a full blockade. The Marathi remained silent. But their ancient texts were being studied again. Texts that spoke of a time before the Council, when power belonged to those who could disappear and return stronger. On the bridge of the Perseus Dawn, Devon watched as a Kelian scout passed within 2 kilometers of their position. The alien ship slowed, sensors sweeping in wide arcs. For a moment, Devon tensed, but the scout moved on, unaware. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Elena placed a hand on his shoulder. They'll never see us coming. Not because we're hidden, because they stopped believing we could be this quiet. And in that silence, the old order began to crumble. Not with explosions, not with declarations, but with the slow, unbearable weight of not knowing. The galaxy had always assumed it could see everything that mattered. Now, for the first time, it faced a truth it could not measure. Humanity had chosen to be unseen, and that choice was more powerful than any weapon. Part 3. Equilibrium Redefined. After 28 days of silence, the galaxy held its breath. Trade routes slowed. Patrols doubled back on themselves. Council sessions ended in shouting or silence. Then, without warning, every diplomatic channel, Kelian, Virellan, Mirathi, and all 17 member species, flickered to life at once. Not with alarms, not with demands, but with a single image. Ambassador Kyle Denton standing in a plain room, wearing simple clothes, no uniform, no insignia. Beside him stood Commander Elena Cruz in her duty blacks and Engineer Jordan Ellis in a worn work jacket. They did not sit on thrones. They did not float in holographic glory. They stood like ordinary people, and that made them more powerful than ever. Kyle spoke first, his voice calm, clear, and carrying no anger. We don't want your empire. We don't want your hierarchy. We only want a seat where our voice carries the same weight as yours. Without begging for it, the words spread faster than any signal before. Across council worlds, leaders paused. Traders stopped mid-deal. Soldiers lowered their weapons. Because for the first time, humanity was not asking. They were stating. And they had proven they could walk away from the table entirely. Kyle continued. You thought silence meant weakness. It didn't. It meant we were done explaining ourselves. We built ships you can't see. We mapped paths you never found. We protected our people, while you debated whether we deserved protection. We did not attack your worlds. We did not sabotage your systems. We simply showed you that your control was an illusion. He stepped aside slightly, letting Elena step forward. She did not smile. She did not threaten. She simply said, for the past 3 weeks, human vessels have shadowed every major council supply line. Not to harm, not to steal, to watch, and to prove we could. If we had wanted war, your food ships would be dark, your fuel convoys stranded, your homeworlds blind. But we chose restraint, not because we feared you, but because we believe peace is possible, if it's built on truth. Then Jordan spoke, his voice quieter but no less firm. Your sensors failed because you assumed you understood everything. We didn't break your tech. We just thought differently. And that's what you feared most, not our weapons, but our minds. The transmission ended not with a bang, but with a single offer. A new charter. Equal representation. Open exchange of non-weaponized technology. Mutual defense against true threats beyond the rim. And one final condition. No more ultimatums. Within hours, the council fractured and reformed. The Kelians, humbled and wary, called for immediate talks. The Virellans, ever pragmatic, drafted amendments to the old accords. Even the Mirathi, silent for weeks, sent a single pulse through the quantum network. Acknowledged. 2 weeks later, a new session convened. Not in the grand obsidian chamber above Virelli's prime, but in neutral space, aboard a jointly staffed station near the Orion Veil. This time, humanity's seat was not steel. It was stone, carved by human hands from an asteroid in the belt, and it sat level with the others. Kyle entered alone again, but this time he was met with nods, not glares. Zarevos did not rise in anger. She stood slowly and said, You made us see what we refused to. It was not an apology, but it was a beginning. On Mars Orbit Station, Devon McKay watched the session unfold on a secure feed. The fleet remained cloaked, but the alert level had dropped to green. Do you think they'll keep their word? He asked. Elena stood beside him, arms crossed, eyes steady. They'll keep it as long as they remember what silence sounds like. On Titan, Jordan powered down the main Ares Veil generator for the first time in over a month. The hum faded, leaving only the quiet hiss of ventilation. Mayako let out a long breath. What now? Now we build, Jordan said. Not just ships, trust slowly, carefully, because they'll test us again. And next time we'll be ready, not with silence, but with strength they can see. Back on Earth in the Colorado bunker, the Shadow Council disbanded. Not with ceremony, but with quiet handshakes. Dr. Lena Cho returned to her lab. General Ray Morgan went home to his garden, and Kyle Denton walked out into the sunlight, squinting against the brightness after weeks underground. He looked up at the sky, where stars burned cold and distant. Somewhere out there, human ships still drifted unseen, a reminder that peace is not given, it is earned. And sometimes it is won not by speaking louder, but by choosing when not to speak at all. In the new council chamber, the first vote under the revised charter passed unanimously. Humanity granted full membership, equal voice, and shared stewardship of the neutral rim. No one mentioned the weeks of silence. No one needed to. It hung in the air like gravity, felt by all, seen by none. As the session ended, Elena stood on the observation deck of Mars Station, watching a human freighter depart for Ceres. Its engines glowed softly against the dark. No veil, no stealth, just a ship flying openly under its own flag, she murmured, so softly only she could hear. Now they'll think twice before underestimating us again. And in that moment, the galaxy shifted, not with fire, not with force, but with the quiet certainty that humanity was no longer a guest. It was a pillar, and the new order would stand only if it stood together,